Jake Carter had always wanted to explore the stars, but marriage to alien princesses was never part of the plan. As an engineer and diplomat for the United Earth Alliance, Jake was sent to the Zorveni Empire, one of the most advanced alien civilizations in the galaxy. The goal was simple: improve relations between Earth and the Zorveni. The Emperor had invited humans to attend a grand festival, a tradition that celebrated unity between their people. Jake, being one of the few human representatives, was honored to be there. The festival was breathtaking. The streets of Zorvena Prime, the capital city, were filled with floating lights, shimmering banners, and music that echoed through the air. Tall, elegant Zorveni nobles moved gracefully, their violet-hued skin glowing under the twin moons. Jake had studied their customs, but experiencing it firsthand was something else entirely. Then the incident happened. Jake was standing near the royal pavilion, watching a traditional dance, when he noticed two young Zorveni women nearby. They wore gold-trimmed dresses that shimmered with every movement, and their silver eyes sparkled with amusement as they whispered to each other. Jake had no idea who they were, but their presence attracted attention. Suddenly, a loud drumbeat echoed through the air. The ground beneath them trembled slightly, an energy wave from the performance stage. The unexpected vibration made one of the women lose her balance. She stumbled forward, her sister reaching out but unable to stop her from falling. Without thinking, Jake moved. His instincts kicked in, just like they would on Earth. He reached out and caught the falling woman before she hit the ground. The entire festival froze. The music stopped. Conversations ceased. Hundreds of eyes turned toward Jake. The woman in his arms looked up at him, her silver eyes wide in shock. Her sister gasped, her hands covering her mouth. Jake had no idea what was happening. Then, a deep voice boomed across the pavilion. Human. Jake turned to see Emperor Zolvar, the ruler of the Zorveni Empire, standing from his throne. His face was unreadable, but his golden eyes locked onto Jake with intense focus. Beside him, high-ranking nobles whispered urgently to each other. Jake let go immediately, stepping back with his hands raised. "I was just helping," he tried to explain. A noble woman nearby gasped. A Zorveni guard gripped his weapon but didn't move. Even the Emperor's advisors looked nervous. The sister who had fallen slowly stood up, brushing dust off her dress. She glanced at Jake, then at her father. A long silence followed. Then, the Emperor spoke again. "Do you understand what you have done?" Jake frowned. "I helped someone who was falling." The crowd murmured. A nobleman shook his head in disbelief. A few younger Zorveni looked at him with admiration, but most appeared shocked beyond words. The Emperor sighed, rubbing his temple. Finally, he turned to his daughters. "Rilia, Tessari, confirm this before the council." Jake's stomach dropped. Princesses. The two women, Rilia, the older sister, and Tessari, the younger one, stepped forward. Rilia crossed her arms, glancing at Jake with mild amusement. Tessari looked more nervous, her hands clasped together. "He touched us," Rilia confirmed. The Emperor's expression darkened. "Then there is no choice." Jake felt a sudden chill. No choice for what? An elder Zorveni noble, dressed in deep blue robes, stepped forward. "By the laws of our people, any man who touches the daughters of the Emperor must take responsibility." Jake blinked. "Wait. Responsibility? What does that mean?" The noble gave him a serious look. "Human by our most sacred tradition. You are now their husband." Jake froze. "What?" The crowd erupted. Some nobles argued. Others laughed in disbelief. The human delegation whispered urgently, trying to understand what had just happened. The festival turned into chaos. Jake took a step back. "Hold on. That's crazy. It was an accident." The Emperor raised his hand, and the noise immediately stopped. He looked at Jake with the calm authority of a ruler who never needed to raise his voice to command respect. "It does not matter. In Zorveni law, there are no accidents in matters of honor." Jake's mind raced. This had to be a joke, right? Some kind of cultural misunderstanding. He turned to Rilia and to Suri, hoping they would object, but Rilia simply smirked. "Well, human," she said, tilting her head. "I hope you're ready for royal life." Tessari, still blushing, looked away. Jake swallowed hard. He had survived alien diplomacy, interstellar travel, and zero-gravity engineering failures, but now he was trapped in a marriage by galactic law. And there was no escape. Jake Carter sat stiffly in a large golden hall, surrounded by towering Zorvani nobles. The air felt heavy with unspoken judgment. Just an hour ago, he had been enjoying the festival, admiring the beauty of an alien world. Now, he was married to 2 alien princesses by a law he didn't even know existed. He ran a hand through his hair, feeling the weight of every pair of eyes in the room. Across from him, Emperor Zalvar sat on a grand throne, his golden eyes calm yet firm. To his left stood Rilia, arms crossed and clearly amused. To his right, Tessari, who looked nervous and avoided Jake's gaze. A tall noble, draped in royal blue, stepped forward and cleared his throat. "Human, as per the ancient law of our people, a man who touches the daughters of the emperor must take responsibility. This law has been followed for over 1,000 cycles." Jake leaned forward. "But I didn't know about the law. Shouldn't there be an exception for that?" A few nobles gasped. The blue-robed elder's expression remained neutral. "Ignorance does not change the law. The rule exists to protect the honor of the royal family." Jake exhaled sharply. "All right, but let's think logically. I wasn't trying to." The emperor raised a hand, silencing him. "This is not a debate. It is the law of our people, and the law is absolute." Jake felt a headache forming. He was a diplomat, trained to handle difficult negotiations, but this was beyond anything he had prepared for. He had to find a way out of this. Fast. An unwelcome proposal. Rilia took a step forward, her silver eyes filled with amusement. "You seem troubled, husband." Jake turned to her. "Of course, I'm troubled. I came here to help with diplomacy, not get married by accident." Tessari finally spoke, her voice softer than her sister's. "We understand this is unexpected, but the law is clear. And if you refuse—" She hesitated. Jake frowned. "If I refuse, what happens?" The blue-robed noble responded. "It would be an insult of the highest level. A rejection of our traditions. It could damage relations between the Zorvani Empire and the United Earth Alliance." Jake's heart sank. This wasn't just about him anymore. If he outright rejected the marriage, it could spark a diplomatic crisis. Earth had worked hard to build trust with the Zorvani. If Jake refused, it might be seen as an insult to the Emperor himself. He turned back to Rilia. "You're really okay with this?" Rilia smirked. "I could do worse. Besides, this could be entertaining." Tessari bit her lip. I don't mind, either." Jake leaned back. "Great, just great." Looking for a loophole, Jake took a deep breath. "Think, Carter. There's always a way out." "What if I prove I'm unworthy?" he asked. The nobles murmured. The Emperor raised an eyebrow. "Explain." Jake sat forward. "If I fail at being a royal consort, if I prove that I am completely unsuitable for this role, then surely there's a rule that allows the marriage to be undone." The Emperor considered this. The elder noble nodded. "There is a precedent. If a royal consort is found unworthy, they may be released from their duty." Jake felt a glimmer of hope. "All right then. What do I have to do to prove I'm not fit for this?" "The trials begin." The Emperor stood. "Very well. If you wish to challenge your fate, you will undergo the trials of the royal consort. These tests will determine if you are truly unfit for this role." Jake's stomach dropped. "Trials? What kind of trials?" Rilia grinned. "Oh, this will be fun." Tessari gave him a sympathetic look. "There are 3 trials. One of wisdom, one of strength, and one of leadership." Jake sighed. Of course there are. The Emperor's voice echoed through the hall. The trials will begin tomorrow. If you fail, you will be freed. If you succeed, the marriage remains. Jake nodded slowly. This was his only chance. All he had to do was fail. How hard could that be? Jake Carter had faced many challenges in his career as a diplomat and engineer, but nothing prepared him for the trials of the royal consort. He had one goal: fail. If he could prove himself unfit for the role, he would be freed from the accidental marriage and return to his normal life. But as he soon discovered, nothing in the Zorveni Empire was easy. The trial of wisdom. The next morning, Jake was led to a grand hall filled with scholars, nobles, and advisors. In the center of the room stood a massive circular table with a glowing holographic map of the galaxy. The Emperor and his daughters sat at the front, watching. An elder Zorvani, dressed in silver robes, stepped forward. The trial of wisdom will test your ability to solve complex problems. As a royal consort, you must be able to think critically and advise the Empire. Jake sighed. All right, what do I have to do? The elder gestured to the hologram. This is a simulation of an interstellar crisis. You are the ruler. Your fleet is small, your resources are limited, and your enemies are approaching. You must decide the best course of action. Jake's eyes widened. A strategy game. He had spent years studying diplomacy, tactics, and engineering. This was his territory. He smirked. All right, let's do this. For the next 3 hours, Jake studied the map, calculated risks, and issued orders. He used human creativity and unpredictability to outmaneuver his enemies. Instead of direct battles, he used psychological tactics, distractions, and diplomatic maneuvers. When the simulation ended, the room was silent. The Emperor leaned forward. Impressive. Jake blinked. Wait, I passed. Rilia chuckled. Not just passed. You won faster than any noble in recent history. Jake groaned. Great. That was not the plan. Tesseri smiled softly. You are smarter than you think, Jake. He sighed. 1 trial down. 2 to go. The trial of strength. The next challenge was physical. Jake was taken to a massive arena, where a crowd had gathered. Rilia and Tesseri stood nearby, watching with interest. A warrior in heavy armor stepped forward. The trial of strength is a test of endurance, not violence. You must prove your resilience. Jake relaxed. Oh, so I don't have to fight. Rilia smirked. Not exactly. You must complete 3 difficult tasks without giving up. Jake groaned. Fantastic. The first challenge was carrying heavy energy cores across a long distance. Zorveni gravity was slightly higher than Earth's, making everything feel heavier. Jake struggled at first, but he used techniques from his engineering work, distributing the weight efficiently. He finished second, but still passed. The second challenge was climbing the Pillar of Honor, a smooth, towering wall with no handholds. Most participants used energy grips to climb, but Jake studied the surface carefully and found small natural cracks. Using human ingenuity, he reached the top without technology, earning applause from the crowd. The final test was standing against strong energy waves. A powerful force tried to knock him down, but Jake dug his feet into the ground, clenched his fists, and focused on balance. He endured longer than most nobles before finally collapsing. As he lay on the ground, breathing hard, Tesseri knelt beside him. You did well. Jake groaned. No, I failed. Right? Rilia laughed. You survived. That means you passed. Jake cursed under his breath. Another trial completed, and he was still stuck here. The trial of leadership. The final test arrived. The trial of leadership. Jake was placed in charge of a group of Zorveni trainees, given limited resources, and told to build a working structure in an open field. The goal was to test his ability to command and inspire others. He smiled. Finally, something I can mess up. He purposely gave bad instructions, expecting the trainees to fail. But something strange happened. They adapted. They asked questions, fixed mistakes, and worked together. Tesseri observed from a distance and spoke softly. "They are learning from you, Jake." Jake blinked. "Wait, what?" Rilia smirked. "They admire how you solve problems. You have shown them a different way of thinking." By the time the structure was finished, Jake realized he had accidentally become a good leader. The Emperor inspected the work and nodded in approval. "You have completed the trials." Jake tensed. This was it, the moment he had been waiting for. He had to fail. The Emperor looked at him. "You have proven yourself worthy. The marriage stands." Jake's heart sank. "Wait, no. I was trying to fail." The Emperor chuckled. "Yet you did not. You are now an honored royal consort of the Zorveni Empire." Jake groaned. "I am never getting out of this, am I?" Rilia grinned. "Welcome to the family, dear husband." Tesseri blushed and looked away. Jake sighed. He had won everything and lost his freedom. And there was no escape now. Jake Carter sat in the royal palace, staring at his reflection in a polished metal mirror. He still couldn't believe it. He had passed all 3 trials. He had tried to fail, but instead he had impressed the Zorveni so much that now he was officially a royal consort. He sighed. "How did my life turn into this?" The door slid open and Rilia stepped inside, her silver eyes shining with amusement. "Still struggling to accept your fate, dear husband?" Jake turned to her, rubbing his forehead. "Yes, because I wasn't supposed to win. I should be on my way back to Earth right now." Rilia chuckled and sat on the armrest of his chair. "You're thinking too much. You should enjoy the honor you've been given." Honor? Jake wasn't sure he would call this an honor. He had just been trapped in an intergalactic marriage, and there was no way out. Tesseri entered the room next, holding a small data tablet. Unlike her sister, she seemed more reserved, her golden eyes avoiding Jake's gaze. "Father has called for a royal dinner tonight. You are expected to attend." Jake groaned. "Great. More formal events where I don't know the rules." Tesseri hesitated before speaking. "I can help you prepare if you'd like." Jake glanced at her, surprised. Unlike Rilia, who enjoyed teasing him, Tesseri seemed genuinely concerned about his well-being. He sighed. "Yeah, that would be helpful. Thanks." Tesseri gave him a small nod, and Rilia smirked. "Careful, Jake. You're starting to accept your role." Jake scowled. "Don't remind me." The royal dinner. That evening, Jake found himself seated between Rilia and Tesseri at a massive dining table. The Emperor sat at the head, watching as servants brought in exotic alien dishes. The nobles whispered amongst themselves, occasionally glancing at Jake. He could tell that not everyone was happy about his presence. Some still saw him as an outsider. As the first course was served, a noble across the table cleared his throat. "So, human, tell us about Earth's traditions regarding marriage. Do you take your responsibility seriously?" Jake put down his fork and forced a smile. "Well, back on Earth, we usually don't get married by accident." A few nobles chuckled, but others frowned. The Emperor spoke, his tone firm. "Jake has proven himself in the trials. He is a worthy consort." Jake glanced at the Emperor. Even though he hadn't wanted this marriage, the Emperor had shown him respect. That was more than he could say for some of the nobles. Another noble, an older man with sharp eyes, leaned forward. "But will he be loyal to the Empire, or will his heart remain with his people?" Jake felt the tension in the room grow. This was a test. They wanted to see if he was truly committed to his new position. He took a deep breath and spoke carefully. "I didn't ask for this, but now that I'm here, I won't dishonor my name, or yours. I'll do my best." The room was silent for a moment. Then, the Emperor nodded. A fair answer. The conversation moved on, but Jake could tell he was still being watched closely. Rilia whispered in his ear, "Not bad, husband. You handled that well." Tesseri gave him a small smile. "I believe you meant what you said." Jake sighed. Did he? He wasn't sure. Unexpected responsibilities. Over the next few days, Jake learned just how serious his new role was. He was given a schedule full of meetings, training sessions, and cultural lessons. He was expected to attend political discussions, give opinions on trade agreements, and even train in royal etiquette. At first, he resisted, but as time passed, he realized something. The Zorvani Empire was not perfect. Their traditions were strong, but sometimes they held them back. The nobles were stubborn, and the leaders were often too rigid in their thinking. Jake, with his human creativity, could see solutions they had never considered. One day, he was in a council meeting discussing planetary resource distribution. The nobles argued for hours over outdated methods, but Jake interrupted. Why not use modular energy grids instead? It's more flexible and prevents power shortages. The room went silent. Then one of the engineers nodded slowly. That could work. The Emperor watched Jake carefully. Rilia smirked. You're getting involved, Jake. Jake crossed his arms. I just don't like watching people make things more complicated than they need to be. Tesseri spoke softly. You care more than you admit. Jake sighed. Was she right? Was he actually starting to accept this? A growing bond. Despite his frustration, Jake had to admit, he was starting to understand Rilia and Tesseri better. Rilia was sharp, confident, and enjoyed challenges. She teased him constantly, but he could tell she respected him. Tesseri was more reserved, but she was kind and thoughtful. She often checked on him, making sure he was adjusting well. One evening, as they walked through the royal gardens, Jake looked at them and asked, You really don't mind this whole situation? You didn't have a choice either. Rilia shrugged. It's unusual, sure, but I find it interesting. Tesseri nodded. We were raised knowing marriage would be political. But you are different, Jake. And I do not think that is a bad thing. Jake exhaled. I don't know what's going to happen, but I'll try to handle this the best I can. Rilia grinned. That's all we ask, dear husband. Jake shook his head, still not used to that. Tesseri giggled. For the first time since arriving, Jake didn't feel completely lost. But deep down, he still had one unanswered question. Was this truly his new life now? Or was there still a way back home? Jake Carter never imagined that one day he would be a royal consort in an alien empire. Yet here he was, standing in the grand halls of the Zorvani Palace, surrounded by nobles, scholars, and warriors, all watching him closely. Over the past few weeks, he had started to adjust to his new reality. The daily meetings, the formal dinners, the endless lessons in etiquette. It was exhausting, but he was adapting. However, there was one problem. Not everyone in the Zorvani court wanted him there. The resistance from the nobles. One afternoon, Jake was in the palace's main courtyard, watching a Zorvani combat demonstration. Warriors moved gracefully, their energy blades flashing in the sunlight as they sparred. A noble named Lord Vekar, an older Zorvani with cold silver eyes, approached him. He was one of the strongest voices against Jake's presence in the empire. A human sitting among Zorvani royalty. It is unnatural, Vekar said, his voice calm but sharp. Jake sighed. Yeah, I didn't exactly plan for this to happen. Vekar narrowed his eyes. Then why do you stay? Why do you act as if you belong? Jake crossed his arms. I don't act like I belong. But I was given this position, and I'm not going to run away just because some people don't like it. Vekar's expression darkened. A Zorvani royal consort must prove strength, not just in trials, but in action. Tell me, human, do you even know how to fight? Jake frowned. He had learned some basic self-defense back on Earth, but against a trained Zorvani warrior, he wouldn't stand a chance. Before he could respond, Rilia stepped beside him, her sharp gaze fixed on Vekar. You doubt my husband's strength, Lord Vekar. Vekar smirked. I doubt he has any at all. Rilia turned to Jake, her expression playful yet serious. What do you think, Jake? Want to prove him wrong? Jake sighed. I don't have much of a choice, do I? Rilia grinned. Nope. The duel. Within minutes, the courtyard was cleared, and Jake stood in the center of a training ring. Vekar faced him, holding a wooden practice staff. Jake was given the same weapon. First to 3 strikes wins, the referee announced. Jake took a deep breath. Stay calm. Think. Use what you know. The duel began. Vekar moved fast. His staff swung toward Jake's side, but Jake dodged just in time. His mind worked quickly. He couldn't match the noble's strength, but he could use speed and strategy. He recalled his engineering training, the laws of force and movement. Instead of blocking, he deflected Vekar's strikes, letting the noble's own momentum throw him off balance. On Vekar's third attack, Jake sidestepped and tapped his shoulder with the staff. A point for Jake. The crowd murmured in surprise. Vekar's expression hardened. Now he was serious. The next round was harder. Vekar moved with precision and skill, forcing Jake to dodge repeatedly. Finally, the noble landed a clean strike to Jake's ribs. 1 point each. Jake gritted his teeth. This was getting painful. The third round started, and Jake knew he had to be smart. Vekar expected him to keep dodging. So instead, Jake moved forward. As Vekar swung, Jake ducked inside the attack range, using his smaller size to his advantage. He quickly struck Vekar's leg before spinning behind him and landing another hit on his back. 2 points for Jake. The crowd gasped. Even Tessari, watching quietly from the side, looked impressed. Vekar's eyes burned with frustration. You are a tricky one, human. Jake smirked. I get that a lot. The final round began. Vekar came in strong, but Jake had learned his pattern. He used quick footwork, dodging at the last second and landing a final strike. 3 points. Jake had won. The courtyard erupted in murmurs and whispers. A human had beaten a Zorveni noble, even if it was just a practice duel. Vekar stared at Jake for a long moment. Then, to Jake's surprise, he nodded slightly. Perhaps you are not as weak as I thought. Asterisk asterisk. He turned and walked away asterisk asterisk. Jake exhaled, wiping sweat from his forehead. Well, that was terrifying. Rilia clapped him on the back. That was amazing. Tessari approached, a thoughtful look in her eyes. You think differently. That is why you won. Jake sighed. Yeah, but now I probably have even more enemies. Rilia smirked. Maybe. But you also earned some respect today. A change in the wind. Later that evening, Jake sat on the palace balcony, looking at the stars. Tessari walked up beside him. You did well today. Jake chuckled. You're not going to say dear husband like your sister. Tessari blushed slightly. No, that still feels strange. Jake exhaled. Yeah, this whole situation is strange. They stood in silence for a moment before Tessari spoke again. You are changing things, Jake. People are watching you. Some will resist, but others will listen. Jake frowned. I didn't ask to change anything. Tessari smiled softly. Yet you are. Jake looked at the sky. He had been so focused on escaping that he hadn't realized something. He wasn't just surviving in the Zorveni Empire anymore. He was making a difference. And that thought scared him more than anything. Jake Carter had never planned to become a key figure in an alien empire. Yet each passing day made it clearer. He was no longer just a human outsider. The duel against Lord Vekar had changed everything. Some nobles still resented him, but others began to see him in a new light. He had proven he wasn't weak, and more importantly, he had proven he could think differently. But with this new recognition came more responsibilities. A meeting with the Emperor. One morning, Jake was summoned to the Emperor's private chamber. The royal guards led him through the towering golden doors, where the emperor sat on an elegant throne, looking deep in thought. Rilia and Tessari were already there, standing on either side of their father. Jake bowed slightly. "You called for me." The emperor nodded. "Sit, Jake Carter." Jake obeyed, sensing something serious was about to happen. The emperor studied him for a moment before speaking. "You have been here for weeks now. I have watched you carefully. You did not choose this fate, yet you do not run from it. You do not hide." Jake exhaled. "Not like I had much of a choice." The emperor smirked. "Perhaps not, but you have something most nobles lack, a fresh mind. The way you handled your duel with Vekar, the way you think during council meetings, the way you adapt. It is useful." Jake frowned. "What are you saying?" The emperor leaned forward. "I want you to take an active role in the empire, not just as a consort, but as an advisor." Jake's eyes widened. "Advisor? You want me to help you rule?" The emperor nodded. "You offer new ideas. You see things differently. That is valuable." Jake glanced at Rilia and Tessari. Did they know about this? Rilia smirked, as if she had expected this. Tessari simply looked at him, waiting for his answer. Jake took a deep breath. He could say no. He could refuse. But deep down, he knew he wouldn't. An unlikely council member. The next day, Jake entered the Imperial Council chamber. The nobles seated around the grand table turned to him with mixed expressions. Some were curious, others hostile. Lord Vekar sat near the center, his expression unreadable. Jake took a seat as the emperor spoke. "Today we discussed the energy crisis on the outer colonies." The nobles immediately began arguing. Some demanded more resources from the core planets, while others insisted on cutting supplies elsewhere. Jake listened carefully. He had learned something from his time on Earth. The problem wasn't always the resources, but the way they were managed. When the room fell into silence, he cleared his throat. Has anyone considered decentralized power systems? Instead of relying on a single supply line, you could create smaller, independent energy hubs. Some nobles scoffed. That would be inefficient. Jake shook his head. Actually, it would prevent full-scale power failures. If one hub goes down, the others still function. A few of the younger advisors looked intrigued. The emperor gave a slow nod. "Interesting." Vekar crossed his arms. "And how would you suggest we implement this, human?" Jake met his gaze. "Let the colonies test it first. If it works, expand it." The emperor turned to his advisors. "Prepare the details. We will test this method." The discussion continued, but Jake noticed something. For the first time, the nobles were listening to him. He was no longer just a consort, a visit to the city. That evening, Jake stood on the palace balcony, looking over the city. It was beautiful, towering buildings, glowing lights, alien ships gliding through the sky. Rilia joined him. "You impressed them today." Jake scoffed. "A few of them, maybe." She smirked. "That's more than before." Tessari walked up next, holding a small tablet. "The emperor has arranged for us to visit the outer districts tomorrow. He wants you to see the colonies firsthand." Jake raised an eyebrow. "You mean leave the palace?" Tessari nodded. "Yes, you wanted to understand the empire. Now you will." Jake felt a mix of excitement and nervousness. He had spent all this time in the palace. What was life really like for the people of the empire? He would soon find out. A dangerous turn. The next morning, Jake, Rilia, and Tessari boarded a royal transport shuttle. A few guards accompanied them, but otherwise, it was a small group. The shuttle flew toward the outer districts, where the common citizens lived. The difference was immediate. The buildings were smaller, the streets busier, and the people looked more cautious. As they walked through the marketplace, Jake noticed something. People were staring at him. Whispers spread through the crowd. Some looked curious, others unhappy. A merchant approached, bowing slightly. "You are the human consort." Jake nodded. Yeah. The merchant hesitated. Then, you are the one who advises the emperor now. Jake blinked. Word spreads fast. The merchant sighed. The nobles only care for themselves. If you are different, prove it. Jake frowned. How? Before the merchant could answer, a loud explosion rocked the area. The ground shook, and smoke rose from a nearby building. People screamed as guards rushed forward. Tesseri grabbed Jake's arm. We need to move. Now. Jake's heart pounded. What just happened? He looked up and saw figures moving in the smoke. And for the first time since arriving in the Empire, he realized. Not everyone wanted change. Some would fight to stop it. The explosion sent shockwaves through the city. People ran in panic as smoke filled the air, and guards rushed to secure the area. Jake's heart pounded as he tried to make sense of what had just happened. Tesseri gripped his arm tightly. We need to leave, now. Rilia was already barking orders at the guards. Secure the civilians. Find the attackers. But Jake wasn't looking at the chaos around him. His eyes were locked on the figures moving through the smoke. They weren't running away. They were coming closer. The attackers revealed themselves. A group of cloaked figures stepped forward, their faces hidden. The crowd fell silent, backing away in fear. One of them, a tall Zorvani with a scared face, pointed at Jake. You, the human. Jake swallowed hard. Yeah, that's me. The figure's voice was calm but firm. You are changing the Empire. Some call it progress. We call it a mistake. Jake clenched his fists. Let me guess, you don't like humans being part of Zorvani society. The man nodded. You do not belong here. The Empire was strong before you arrived. You are a disruption. Rilia stepped forward, her eyes blazing. Jake is part of this Empire now. If you have a problem with that, you have a problem with us. The attacker smirked. We know. That is why we are here. With a swift motion, he raised a small device, and suddenly, energy barriers activated all around the marketplace, trapping Jake, Rilia, and Tesseri inside. The guards tried to push through, but the barriers held strong. Jake's mind raced. A trap. This wasn't just a protest, it was a direct attack. Fighting back, the attackers rushed forward, weapons drawn. Jake barely had time to react before Rilia pulled him back, deflecting an energy blade with her own. Tesseri moved with deadly precision, dodging strikes and landing quick counterattacks. But there were too many enemies. Jake grabbed a metal pole from the ground, holding it like a staff. He wasn't a warrior, but he had learned something from his fight with Vekar. Use what you have. An attacker lunged at him, and Jake sidestepped at the last second, swinging the pole and knocking the attacker's legs out from under him. Another enemy came from behind. Jake turned, raising the pole, but before he could react, a blast of energy knocked the attacker away. Jake spun around and saw Vekar standing outside the barrier, a weapon in hand. The noble smirked. You are not the only one who dislikes chaos, human. The guards had finally disabled part of the barrier, and reinforcements flooded in. The attackers, realizing they were outmatched, began retreating. Jake caught his breath as the last of them disappeared into the shadows. The aftermath. The marketplace was damaged, but still standing. People slowly emerged from hiding, whispering among themselves. Rilia wiped sweat from her brow. That was close. Tesseri nodded, looking at Jake. Are you hurt? Jake shook his head. I'm fine, but I need answers. He turned to Vekar. Who were they? Vekar crossed his arms. A faction that believes the Empire should remain unchanged. They see your presence as a threat. Jake frowned. So they're against me. But why attack here? Why now? Tesseri's expression was serious. Because you are gaining influence. The people are listening to you. Jake exhaled. Great. So now I have enemies who want me gone. Rilia smirked. Welcome to politics. A conversation with the Emperor. That night, Jake sat in the Emperor's private chamber once again. The Emperor's face was unreadable. "You handled yourself well today." Jake scoffed. "Barely." The Emperor leaned forward. "You now see the truth of the Empire. Change is never easy. There will always be those who resist it." Jake nodded. "Yeah, I get that. But what do we do about them?" The Emperor was silent for a moment before speaking. "That is your choice." Jake blinked. "My choice." The Emperor's gaze was sharp. "You are no longer just a consort, Jake Carter. You are a symbol of change. But symbols are only as strong as the people behind them." Jake realized what he was really being asked. Would he continue just trying to survive in the Empire, or would he actively work to change it? He had spent so long thinking about escaping, but now, for the first time, he wondered, did he actually want to leave? The Emperor's voice was calm but firm. "You have a choice, human. Will you shape the future, or will you run from it?" Jake took a deep breath. He already knew his answer. The future begins. The next day, Jake stood on the palace balcony, watching the city below. The people were talking about what had happened, about how the human consort had stood his ground. Tesseri joined him. "Have you made your decision?" Jake nodded slowly. "Yeah, I'm staying." Rilia smirked. "Good. It wouldn't be fun without you." Jake chuckled. "Guess I better start acting like an actual advisor, huh?" Tesseri's eyes softened. "The Empire is changing, Jake, with or without you. But now, you have the power to guide that change." Jake looked at the sky. He had come to this empire by accident. He had never planned to stay. But now he was ready to shape the future.